In a tit-for-tat move, Mali has imposed visa bond requirements on United States citizens.
On October 12, Mali Foreign Ministry announced that U.S. citizens now must post a refundable bond up to $10,000 when applying for business and tourist visa.
The general, Assimi Goita, isn't playing. He isn't joining the group to go beg Trump for mercy.
Two African countries just told the United States to back off, and they're not playing games. Mali slapped Americans with a $10,000 visa bond. Burkina Faso rejected U.S. deportation demands, and the entire Sahel region is standing up to Washington in ways nobody saw coming. What you're watching right now is a diplomatic earthquake. For the first time in decades, African nations are fighting back against American immigration policies with the same weapons Washington uses against them. Let me paint you the full picture. On October 10, 2025, the Trump administration announced something called the Visa Bond Pilot Program. Sounds boring, right? But here's what it actually means. If you're from Mali and you want to visit America for business or vacation, you now have to pay up to $10,000 up front just to get a visa. That's on top of the regular $185 visa fee. And you only get that money back if you leave on time, stay one day too long, or apply for asylum. And they keep every penny. Mali wasn't the only target. The U.S. added 7 African countries to this program, including Malawi, Zambia, Gambia, Mauritania, Sao Tome and Principe, and Tanzania. Washington justified this by saying these countries have high visa overstay rates. In 2023, more than 300,000 people with business and tourist visas stayed longer than they were supposed to. The U.S. government calls this a national security issue. But here's where things get interesting. Mali didn't cry about it. They didn't beg. They didn't send diplomats to Washington with their hats in their hands. Instead, just 3 days later, on October 13th, Mali's foreign ministry made an announcement that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. They're doing the exact same thing to Americans. Starting immediately, any U.S. citizen who wants to visit Mali for business or tourism has to post a bond of up to $10,000. Same rules, same amount, same game. Mali's government said this violates a 2005 agreement between the two countries that guaranteed long-term visa access. They called it a matter of reciprocity and respect for international law. Translation? You hit us, we hit you back. Think about what this means. An American business person trying to visit Mali now needs to drop 10 grand they might never see again. Aid workers, researchers, journalists, anyone traveling from the U.S. faces the same barrier Mali's citizens face when trying to visit America. The message is crystal clear. If you treat us like potential criminals, we'll treat you the same way. Now, Mali isn't doing this alone. Enter Burkina Faso, Mali's neighbor and partner in what's becoming a full-blown revolution in West Africa. On October 10th, the same day the U.S. announced the Visa Bond program, Burkina Faso's foreign minister rejected what he called an indecent proposal from the Trump administration. The U.S. didn't just ask Burkina Faso to take back their own citizens who were being deported. They asked them to accept deportees from other countries, people who had nothing to do with Burkina Faso, non-citizens from Asia, Latin America, anywhere. The Trump administration wanted to dump them in Burkina Faso like it's some kind of international prison yard. Burkina Faso said no, hard no, not happening. To understand why this is huge, you need to know what's been happening in the background. The Trump administration has been pressuring African countries for months to accept deportees, even people who aren't from those countries. And they've been using every trick in the book to make it happen. Countries that say yes get money and political favors. Countries that say no get punished. Eswatini agreed to take up to 160 deportees in exchange for $5.1 million in U.S. funding. Ghana, Rwanda, and Uganda have also accepted expelled migrants under bilateral deals. Guatemala received the first flight with third-country deportees just days ago. The pattern is clear. America is shopping around for countries willing to take people they don't want. But Burkina Faso isn't playing that game, and the consequences were immediate. The U.S. suspended all visa services at Burkina Faso's embassy in Washington. Want a visa to visit America? Too bad. You now have to travel to Togo, a neighboring country, just to apply. It's punishment, plain and simple. Cross us and we make your life harder. South Sudan faced even worse. Initially, the U.S. revoked visas for all South Sudanese passport holders after a deportation dispute. They later softened that stance after South Sudan agreed to accept 8 people from Asian and Latin American countries. That's how the game works. Comply or suffer. But here's what makes Mali and Burkina Faso different. They're not backing down. And they're not alone. They're part of something bigger called the Alliance of Sahel States, formed in 2023 with Niger. These three countries have joined forces, and in January 2025, they withdrew from ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. ECOWAS was pushing them to hold elections and return to democracy after military coups in all three nations. The alliance said, "No thanks, we're going our own way." To really understand what's happening here, you need to know the backstory. Burkina Faso is led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who's only 37 years old. He came to power in a military coup in September 2022, and ever since, he's been reshaping his nation in ways that terrify Western governments. In January 2023, he kicked out the French ambassador, calling France an imperial state. 1 month later, he ordered French troops to leave Burkina Faso entirely. This triggered a wave across West Africa. Mali, Chad, Senegal, Niger, and Ivory Coast all followed suit and expelled French forces from their lands. French President Emmanuel Macron responded by accusing these countries of ingratitude, saying they forgot to thank France. But Traoré and leaders like him aren't interested in thanking anyone. They're interested in controlling their own resources. For over half a century after gaining independence, France maintained significant control over its former African colonies through something called the CFA franc. This is a currency used by 14 African nations, and it's fixed at a rate against the euro. What that means in practice is this: importing from and exporting to Europe is cheap, but trading with the rest of the world is expensive. France maintains veto power over the monetary policies of the CFA franc, keeping African states economically dependent on Paris. Traoré has called the CFA franc a mechanism that maintains Africa in slavery. Along with Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso is working to create a new currency to break free from this system. They're not just talking about it, they're actually doing it, and it's not just currency. Burkina Faso's economy revolves around gold. They're the world's 13th largest producer, making about 100 tons per year, worth roughly $6 billion. But because foreign corporations own and control production, Burkina Faso and its people see almost nothing from this wealth. The country's entire annual GDP is only about $18 billion. Think about that. They produce $6 billion in gold alone, but the total economy is only 3 times that. In August 2024, Traoré's government nationalized 2 major Western-known gold mines. They paid only $80 million, a fraction of the $300 million those mines reportedly sold for in 2023. In November, they announced construction of the country's first gold refinery. The message is clear: we're taking back control of our resources. Mali is following a similar path. After their own military coup, Mali expelled French forces and turned to Russia for military support. Western media loves to frame this as Mali falling under Russian influence, but that's not how people in Mali see it. They see it as trading one partner for another, one who doesn't come with centuries of colonial baggage. Both countries have also kicked out Western-funded media outlets. Radio France International, France 24, Voice of America, BBC, Deutsche Welle. All gone. The governments labeled them agents of neocolonialism. Western human rights organizations condemned this as a crackdown on dissent. But from the perspective of Traoré and Mali's leaders, these outlets represent foreign propaganda trying to destabilize their governments. General Michael Langley, commander of U.S. Africa Command, appeared before the U.S. Senate in April and accused Traoré of corruption and helping Russia and China establish an imperial foothold in Africa. He met repeatedly with defense officials in Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso's neighbor, both before and after a reported coup attempt against Traoré last month.